and freedom of speech. The Apology presents Socrates, right, as presenting the most intransigent case for the philosopher as a radical critic or questioner of society. Socrates demands that the Athenians change not simply this or that aspect of their policy, but he demands nothing less than a drastic, I would even say revolutionary change in Athenian civic life, in Athenian civic culture. He tells his fellow citizens, right, that their lives are not worth living. Only the examined life is worth living, and you are not living examined lives. Therefore, your life cannot possibly have any value to it. Even when presented with the option to cease philosophizing, he refuses to do so on the ground that, again, he is acting under a command, a divine command, and cannot do otherwise. Is Plato asking us to regard Socrates as a man of high principle, standing up for what he believes in the face of death, or as a kind of revolutionary agitator who cannot and should not be tolerated by a society whose basic laws and values he will not accept? To some degree, I am inclined to answer that both of those questions have something to them. Maybe the answer, or an answer to this question, is revealed in the Crito, the companion dialogue, the companion speech that goes along with the Apology, although it typically gets much less attention than the Apology. In part because I think the dialogue presents, as it were, the city's case, the case of the city against Socrates. I mean, consider some of the following. If the Apology presents the philosopher's case against the city, Socrates' case against the city, the Crito presents the city's case against the philosopher. Here Socrates makes the case against himself. You might say he makes the case against himself better than his accusers in the courtroom did so in the Apology. The speech between Socrates and the laws that forms, as it were, the kind of central action of the dialogue presents the case that Meletus and Anytus should have made against him. While the Apology seems to denigrate the political life as requiring complicity in injustice, and Socrates says he will have no part of laws or policies that entail injustice, the Crito makes the case for the dignity of the laws, the dignity or majesty of the city and its laws. While the Apology defends, again, a politics of principled abstinence or disobedience to the political life, the Crito makes the most complete and far-reaching case for obligation and obedience to the law that has perhaps ever been made. So how do we reconcile, if we can, these two apparently contradictory points of view in these two dialogues? These two dialogues, it should be evident, differ not only in content, but in their dramatic context. Just consider again some of the following. The Apology is a speech given before a large and largely anonymous audience of over 500 persons, the assembly, the court. We see Socrates addressing, the only time in any Platonic dialogue, an audience of this size. The Crito, on the other hand, is a conversation between Socrates and a single individual, only one person. The Apology takes place in the court of Athens, the most public of settings, while the Crito occurs within the darkness and confinement of a prison cell. The The Apology shows Socrates defending himself and his life as a gift of the god that most truly benefits the city. But in the Crito, we see him bow down to the authority of the laws that he seems to have previously rejected. And finally, if the Apology presents Socrates as the first martyr for philosophy, the first person to die for the cause of philosophy, the Crito shows Socrates' trial and sentence as a case of justice delivered. These huge contrasts, again, they force us to ask a question. What is Plato doing in presenting these two very different points of view? What is his point in presenting these two works with two such sharply contrasting perspectives on the relation of Socrates to the city? Was Plato confused? Was he contradicting himself? Was he, what was he doing? Big question. I hope I have time to answer it. So, let's look into the Crito just a little bit. Crito is named for a friend and disciple of Socrates, who at the outset of the dialogue is sitting as a watchful guardian over his mentor. He urges Socrates to allow him to help him escape. The jailers have been bribed, and escape would be made easy. But rather than trying to convince Crito directly, Socrates creates a dialogue. Actually, you might say a dialogue within the larger dialogue, a dialogue between himself and the laws of Athens, where he puts forward the case against escape, that is to say, the case against disobedience to the law. And the argument could be summarized as follows. No state can exist without rules. The first rule of any state is the rule that citizens are not free to set aside the rules, to choose among them which ones to obey and to disobey. To engage in civil disobedience of any kind is not only to call this or that rule into question, but it is to call into question the very nature of law, the very question of the rules. To question or disobey the law is tantamount to destroying the authority of the law. The breaking of so much of a single law constitutes the essence of anarchy, constitutes the essence of lawlessness. It is a far-reaching argument for obedience to the law. The breaking of even a single law calls into question the authority of law as such. It's a very powerful argument that, in a way, Socrates makes against himself, putting that speech in the mouth of the laws. But he goes even further than this. The citizen, he says, owes his very existence to the laws. We are what we are because of the power and authority of the laws, the customs, the traditions, the culture that has shaped us. The laws, he says, have begat us. And the use of that term, begat, in our translation, is clearly intended to resonate with something you might say we might think of as something biblical about it. The citizen is in a word created, begat by the laws themselves. They exercise a kind of paternal authority over us, such that disobedience to any law constitutes an act of impiety or disrespect of the oldest things around us. The laws are not only like our parents, they are like our ancestors, the founding fathers, as we might say, who are owed respect and piety. In many ways, the Crito, in some respects, is the Platonic dialogue about piety. Socrates seems to accept here entirely the authority of the law. He does not offer arguments for non-compliance as he does in the Apology. So what happened all of a sudden to Socrates, the apostle of civil disobedience, Socrates, the apostle of principled abstention? He accepts entirely, or the laws force him to accept entirely, the covenant that every citizen has with the laws that binds them to absolute obedience. The question is, why does Socrates exhibit such proud defiance and independence of the laws in the Apology, and such total, even kind of mouse-like, acquiescence to the laws in the Crito? What happened to him? I mean, why is he all of a sudden become so humble and acquiescent? What happened to his language about being the gift of the God? Well, that's something I want you to think about, and maybe I'm sure you'll want to talk about it in your sections. But let me propose something like the following to answer, or at least to respond to this paradox, this question. The Apology and the Crito represent a tension. They represent even a conflict between two more or less permanent and irreconcilable moral codes. The one represented by Socrates regards reason, that is to say, the sovereign reason of the individual, as the highest possible authority. It is the philosopher's